We are recording and warmly welcoming you. The session on enhancing rural water through people-centered data and inclusive cooperation. Good morning to our people in the West. Good early afternoon to the people here in Stockholm, and late afternoon, good evening to the people in the East. Happy to have you online on a very interesting session. My name is Barbara van Koppen. I'm with the International Water Management Institute, and since a long time involved in multiple use water services. I will quickly remind about the early 2000s, and the whole notion of integrated water resource management really came up. Water is a connector, and for people, it's logic. You need water for drinking, you need water for other domestic uses, you need water for livestock, for the crops, for other businesses, etc. So for people, it is logic that water is a connector. And that was especially the case in low-income rural areas, where our focus is. There, it's clear that especially women, but also the men, they know we need water for domestic uses, but also for life-bringing basic agriculture, livestock, cropping, etc. And then we found the early 2000s in the wash sector, IFC and others, but also from the irrigation sectors, VO, IMI, others. Basically, we realized that we designed our infrastructure for a single use, either domestic uses or cropping. But the people on the ground in low-income rural areas, they use it for multiple uses, because they need water for their multiple uses. And we basically realized that it's not illegal. It's a good idea to develop multi-purpose infrastructure. And we saw this worldwide, whether it was small pumps or wells, or whether it was bigger dams. In the low-income rural areas, people need water for multiple uses, and they use it accordingly with whatever infrastructure is there, self-supplied or publicly supported infrastructure. And certainly around homesteads, water is used for multiple purposes. But even in other sites of use, rivers or dams, used for multiple uses. Even in distant fields, where the main purpose would be agriculture and irrigation, you still see that the livestock is coming and drink the water. So that is when the whole concept of multiple use services, MUS or MUS, really got traction. And over time, also when the rural water supply network took up the issue of MUS, and you will hear the team leaders, private team leader, the other two team leaders are also online. We really moved to the human capital, the water, the community-led water infrastructure, but also the community, human capital, capacity building as a starting point. So MUS, participatory approach to listen to the priorities and the needs of the communities. So we provide support, technical, etc., but we listen, and it's based on what the priority of the communities. I think the normal housekeeping rules. Next slide, please. Hold, please introduce yourself, etc. Send your questions to the chat box. Feel free, and we end with a small Mentimeter for your opinion on what happened. And then the program itself. Next slide. Well, we had the first one, that was me. And I'm very happy to hand it over to David Smith, also a team leader on MUS in the Rural Water Supply Network. And then to the speakers from all continents to say what has happened basically since the early 2000s. And that will be followed by Q&A. Thank you very much. David, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Barbara. Here we are in a hotel, very close to World Water Week Congress Center. We've managed to connect all of us here in person. And to all of you online from wherever you are joining us, we see already some connecting from Nepal and for sure all over the world. We are incredibly fortunate to have a really great panel here with us today that we've chosen on purpose to allow us to have an idea of how Moose has actually transformed in some areas and how policy is changing thanks to some of these implementations and some of these local participatory initiatives. And with that, I would like to actually introduce each of our esteemed panelists. First, we'll start with James Origa Otino. James is an engineer and a public policy expert. He has extensive experience in water development, specifically in public policy analysis and humanitarian assistance. Since 2009, he's been working from local to global. And he's essentially allowed for the delivering of water and sanitation services to those most in need across Africa, from Kenya, Somalia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Tanzania, and the Ivory Coast. In this period, he has built up his skills and leadership capabilities in developing strategic policies, leading to research and supply in timely, actionable policy advice. He's worked for numerous organizations, from World Renew to Oxfam, Mercy Corps, United Nations Development Program, and private consulting firms, and currently at the World Bank. I'd also just like to add that James has taken up a position as chair of the Rural Water Supply Network, and so we are incredibly honored to have James here with us. And with that, we have James, over to you.
Thank you very much, David. I hope you can all hear me well. Can you? Can you hear me well? All right, thank you.
We can hear you.
All right, so I just wanted to share a little bit of experience from some examples, especially here in Kenya, when scaling up multiple water use at policy level. And I think the focus of my presentation is sort of abstracting from the community level and having standards and guidelines at national level that will guide communities. This is the picture you see on your screen. This is from an actual intake that I went to on a river up in Mount Kenya. So right now, all the water comes out of this, and all of it goes through. They don't have a pipe. It all goes through an open channel. They use it for domestic uses, they use it for livestock, they use it for farming. So I think the policy question right now comes to around how do we provide proper guidance to such kind of community water systems in terms of designing infrastructure for that allows for multiple water use in a safe way. The government of Kenya is currently has a manual which they are keen to revise. They're in the process of revising this manual to sort of make it more, provide more useful guidance in terms of how to advance and champion multiple water users. If you can go to the next slide, please. So I think Professor Barbara highlighted a lot of these. Communities don't compartmentalize and can tailor to their needs. Yeah? There's a de facto use without, like the intake I'm showing there, it is a de facto use of the system without planning and regulating it, which in a way exposes, jeopardizes public health and sustainability of that scheme. Because right now, that water is not treated. It comes all the way it is. They use it for drinking, they use it for livestock, they use it for, farming. So it puts a risk on their health if it is not properly designed, but also there can be overuse and over-abstraction to meet all these different needs without proper guidance that puts a problem on system. And then there's a problem of tariff. How do they differentiate, the charges for the different users in a way that reflect, the model they're developing? So these are some of the concerns that we've been facing in terms of the discussions you're having with the communities. Next, yeah. So here in Kenya right now, we have a big program, $250 million grant to the county government of Kenya. It's called Kenya WASH, Water Sanitation and Hygiene Program, and it's a performance-based financing program where funds are released to the government based on certain disbursement-linked indicators, and then there are two. One of the DLI, DL number 2, measures the number of households not provided with access to improved water services. So each county, there are about 19 counties. Each county will get about $12 million over, a 6 months period, and this $12 million for developing rural water supply infrastructure to meet the different needs. So right now, one of the discussions we've been having with this county government, how do we incentivize them to design the water systems they use in such a way that it's designed as a multiple water use system, because these are rural communities. But the pushback, the question we are getting from these communities, which I want to bring to the discussion here, is there are no clear policy directives. The design practice guidelines given to local governments to develop these rural water supply systems are not very specific and provide some clear guidance on how to do it in a multiple water use approach. So this is still an ongoing interaction and discussions we're having, and a lot of the feedback we'll get from here will feed a lot of the conversations we continue to have with the county governments to finalize, the design of this program. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as I mentioned, we are providing government support to do a review of the existing manual to include clear guidelines, and we're also undertaking a study among this full community to understand, their user behaviors and community demands. So, and I think the discussion here, which I want to bring to this community of practice, is just to hear some of the experiences, highlighting specific examples where at scale, government has provided national level specific policy directives or design or practice guidelines on how MUS is integrated in the design of rural water supply systems. So looking at clear policy documents, regulatory directions on tariffing that allows, for example, do you charge as a specific amount for livestock keeping or for farming that is different from domestic uses like potable, cleaning, washing? So it would be interesting to hear the thought from the participants. What are some of those specific, nuances in terms of policy direction, institutional arrangements to provide better guidance? Yeah. Next one. I think it should be the last slide, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah, no. That was the last one. If you can just go to the previous one. So yeah, so this if you can show the previous slide, please, before you go to this one. Yeah, so this is really, I would want to put a pause there. So it'll be interesting I'll be happy to provide more clarification, but most importantly to hear some of the insights specific to these specific issues that we have, design at scale level issues that you're facing in terms of scaling up MUS as a design approach. Thank you. Back to you, David.
Thank you very much, James. Very interesting insights that we have from Kenya, and indeed some of these challenges that we foresee. Challenges are numerous, and potentially there are ways of overcoming them. And Jean-Marie Kilishi Onema can potentially provide us with some of these ideas, specifically where he starts to speak a little bit about this capacity side and how capacity needs to be institutionalized. But without going too much into detail, let me rather introduce Jean-Marie to you, who is the Executive Manager and Head of WaterNet Secretariat. He oversees the implementations of capacity development activities in integrated water resource management across 16 SADC countries. He has and holds an extraordinary full professorship position at the Unit of Environmental Sciences and Management at Northwest University in South Africa. He is currently the Secretary General of the International Association of Hydrological Sciences. And here I'd just like to add that is actually quite a significant position. In its 101-year history, he is the first African to hold this position. He's also a good friend, somebody that I've known for some years now, and also forms part of the WMB Strategic Advisory Council. But with that, I'll hand over to Jean-Marie. In fact, he's recording. We've got him here in person today, but we have a recording from his presentation, and so we'll play that for you now.
Greeting, colleagues, and welcome to our session. I'm Jean-Marie Kileshionema, the WaterNet Executive Manager, and I'll be talking to you about knowledge management and multiple use water services with a strong focus on the rural Limpopo. The outline of my brief talk will be as you can see there, and I'm going mainly to talk about two major initiatives that WaterNet were involved into. And in the two initiatives, we are going to look at the capacity of the individuals, but not only individuals in isolation, because we believe that for effectiveness, that capacity should be supported by the institutions or the institutional setup, both in terms of organization or the community where the participants are operating from, but also the enabling environment. So the first initiative that I would like to share with you today is the one under the challenge program on water for food that we implemented for about 10 years in the Limpopo Basin. And for today, I'll mainly look at what we learn from small water infrastructures in the Mzingwani, which is the Limpopo part in Zimbabwe. And we had an in-depth assessment of 162 small water infrastructures that were made of boreholes, your wells, your Widsmo, as well as small dams. So what transpired after looking at the multiple use approach, looking at multiple water sources, your multiple water use, the multiple livelihood benefits, as well as the multiple water institution involved, when it came to capacity development and the human capital for multiple use water services, we actually discovered that appropriate technology were quite critical in terms of uptake when it comes to farmers on the ground. Some of the bush pump were not very friendly, for instance, to ladies. In addition to that, we also learned that extension officers needed to be trained quite thoroughly in order to actually sustain that momentum when it comes to the actually transfer of knowledge on the ground. But also the farmers' trainings in terms of operation and maintenance of those small water infrastructure was critical. But we realized that it had to be very practical, down to earth, but also several of them, meaning that it's not a kind of a once-off event. Even within the framework of one project, actually the actual skill transfer was not the right one. In addition to that, it's the issue of monitoring of the learning process through actual results, which were actually their productivity, but also the way they use those small water infrastructure, but also the institutionalization of the knowledge, making sure that we don't keep the knowledge within few individuals, but it actually, some of the material produced are actually kept at community-based institutions that can actually also serve beyond the individuals that were trained. Tool, equipment like your tanks made a big difference, but also human beings showed also the adaptation, so they went beyond the small water infrastructure that were provided to them to look for alternative sources like your riverbed, your riverbed sand, for instance. That's the first example. The second one that we came across with colleagues from several networks, but this time not only in the Limpopo, but across the African continent, was that when we look at multiple water services, there's a need for effectiveness to look at it in a systemic way, where in fact capacity development, it's not enhanced in itself, whether you're looking at people, organization, or society, but it should be put in what was referred to as social innovation, looking at technological solution, the governance at multi-level, as well as some form of business roadmap linking the demand to the supply. So, I would want to thank you again for your attention, though brief, and to invite you to consider visiting also the website of the International Association of Hydrological Sciences, where we have a digital water globe with other examples also of multiple use water services. Thank you very much for your attention.
Presentation and Jean-Marie here with us online. So by all means, please do add your questions to the chat box. We can read you here. So hello, Milton from Kenya, or Natalie, it's based in France, Valerie in Switzerland, Caleb from the DRC, Julieta from Malawi, Timothy from Kenya. You're all here and welcome. And by all means, add your questions to the chat box. We'll be able to read them here, and we can ask directly to all of our speakers that have joined us online. So we now have an understanding a little bit of how we and why we should institutionalize knowledge, how different local perspectives can help change exactly the mood management of water and exactly how that can look. So we have an African perspective, looking at the Limpopo example. And now we move to Latin America, to Colombia specifically. And we have a look at what that and those local initiatives look like. With that, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Isabel Dominguez Riviera. She's an associate professor at the School of Civil Engineering from Universidad Industrial de Santander in Colombia. Her research areas include water management, rainwater harvesting, multiple uses of water, the interaction between water and participation, rural water supply, self-supply, and hydrological services analysis. She has actively participated in various funded research projects, supervised several master's and undergraduate theses, co-authored 2 books, and contributed to several articles in academic journals. Very excited to hear from Isabel, and we have her recording now, and so we'll be able to play that for you.
Greetings from Colombia. My name is Isabel Dominguez. I'm a lecturer at Universidad Industrial de Santander, and I'm happy to talk about MUS in Colombia. My talk will briefly address the Colombian context, provide a timeline of the Colombian regulation on water provision, discuss the institutional change that has allowed consideration of the MUS ideas, and provide some final remarks. Colombia is in the northwestern part of South America, The population is estimated to be around 52 million for 2024. Colombia has suffered an internal armed conflict which resulted in an integral migration of people from the rural areas to the cities, making it a predominantly urban country where only 90% of the population, about 9.5 million people, currently live in rural areas. 81% of the rural households developed agricultural activities such as having crops, livestock, or both, mostly in plots lower than 5,000 square meters, where people could hardly develop something beyond subsistence agriculture. Thus, rural poverty is a massive challenge evidenced by the multidimensional poverty index, and lack of access to water supply is one of the factors that has higher impact on this index. The Colombian regulation for water provision in rural areas has evolved considering key aspects promoted by the MUS approach. In 2000, we had the first technical regulation to design water supply systems, which contemplated an urban perspective to design rural systems. In 2007, a water supply and sanitation policy was enacted that privileged investments in urban and regional schemes, which left behind rural areas. From 2005 to 2008, Colombia participated in the international MUS project of the Challenge Program on Water and Food, and Sinara Institute was the Colombian partner, and a learning alliance was formed to come out with ideas on how to promote MUS. One of the results of this project was the book Guidelines for the Planning and Design of Multiple Water Use Systems in Rural Areas of Colombia, published in 2011. Sinara continued working closely with policymakers in MUS, and in 2014, the government published the first policy for water supply and sanitation in rural areas. In 2018, the Ministry of Housing published a technical regulation specific to the planning of water supply systems in rural areas, and in 2021, the government published the National Plan for Water Supply and Sanitation in Rural Areas. Now, I will delve into how key aspects of the MUS approach have changed when comparing the former legal framework before 2014 with the current regulations. First, in the former legal framework, suitable alternatives for rural water provision were centralized systems providing potable water through household connections, only allowing human consumption, with allocation depending on the settlement population and climate. It was up to 150 liters per capita per day for settlements under 2,500 people. Systems should only provide drinking water from treated surface water and groundwater. Also, water should be provided with the highest quantity, quality, coverage, and continuity standards. The former regulation required the mandatory installation of micrometers in all households, and a regulated tariff methodology was different for providers with less than 2,500 subscribers. Administration, operation, and maintenance should be in charge of formal organizations with statutes and recognition by competent entities that fulfill all legal provisions. And finally, the former regulation did not mention community participation, capacity building, or post-construction support. In contrast, the new regulation also considers as suitable options alternative collective solutions, which comprise the supply of untreated or partially treated water through household connections, standpipes providing untreated water, rainwater harvesting, and alternative individual solutions. Besides human consumption, the current regulation includes water needed to support rural family livelihoods, such as agriculture, livestock activities, etc., and allow an allocation up to 200 liters per capita per day to cater for these needs. Regarding quality, The new regulation allows the supply of untreated or partially treated water, which can be complemented by devices or techniques for water treatment at the household level, and is more flexible considering various methods for estimating water consumption. It also includes the possibility of implementing practices such as reuse and water loss management. Regarding progressiveness, projects must prioritize the basic needs of water for human and domestic consumption, foreseeing action plans to gradually improve the delivery of services. The new regulation does not have a fixed tariff methodology, but talks about contributions or fees required to ensure systems administration, operation and maintenance, and community management is promoted. Also, the administrations of alternative solutions are not considered formal service providers and are subject to differential surveillance, which is more support than surveillance. Furthermore, community participation, capacity building, and post-construction support are addressed aimed at the long-term system's sustainability. As final remarks, I will say that research and advocacy on the MOOS approach were effective in incorporating the principles promoted in current regulations, making them better to capture the rural people needs. It is critical that these regulatory changes are accompanied by institutional strengthening at the local level, engineering training programs that consider these approaches, and adequate financing that allows these regulatory changes to be materialized in sustainable infrastructure in the territories. These are the references of my presentations. Many thanks, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Isabel, with this recording. And of course, Isabel is joining us live, and she's in Colombia, which is 6:30 in the morning there. So, Isabel, that's a fantastic effort, and thank you for joining us online. So, any questions that you have for Isabel, for James or John Marie, please add them into the question box and the chat box that we have there for you. As I mentioned before, we are reading it here live in this session, and we can greet you, Vasco from Ghana, or Della, that you're there in The Hague, and saying really enjoying the knowledge being shared, so much to absorb. Couldn't agree more. Really interesting presentations that allows us a better understanding of how one country, one local community is adapting and implementing MOOS, and how that policy from Isabel's perspective has managed to change what has previously been implemented. With that, we'd then take you now very much east to Nepal, and then we have Narayan Singh Kawas. Narayan is not only the co-theme lead together with Barbara and myself of the MOOS theme in the Rural Water Supply Network, but he's also the technical specialist in Sustainable Wash for All, the SUSWA project in Nepal. He's an engineer and is currently pursuing his PhD in water resources. He has a solid experience in rural water supply and worked in different organizations and projects with the likes of UNOPS, IDE, Nepal, the Finnish Consulting Group, Ramboll, WaterAid, International Medical Corps, Plan International, and Action Contra la Faim. He's obviously had different responsibilities in each one of those, but is really one of the go-to people in Nepal for MOOS. So very happy to hear from Narayan's recorded message now, and he is also joining us online. So any questions you have for Narayan, please add them into the chat box.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to my presentation. I am Narayan Singh Khawas, working as a technical specialist in Sustainable Wash for All, SUSWA project funded by Government of Nepal, European Union, and Government of Finland. The project is in implementation in Karnali province of Nepal with the technical assistance of NIRAS Finland. I am also Moose co-theme leader in RWSN, a global network of rural water supply practitioners. Today, my presentation is on multiple uses of water services, Moose practices in Nepal. My presentation's outlines are Moose context in Nepal, community-led Moose, Moose by design options, water management technologies integration, scaling up and institutionalization of Moose. Multiple uses of water services refers to the water services that fulfills the domestic and productive need of water. In Nepal, a Moose system by design was started 20 years back by ID Nepal. Since then, Moose is continuously in practice by different organizations in Nepal. Nepal Moose Network record shows more than 1170 such systems throughout the country. Government of Nepal, Government of Finland, European Union, USAID and other donor agencies are supporting through different projects for this Moose systems. Agencies like ID, NEVA, SUSWA has been promoting Moose with the development of design guideline, manual and such tools. I have listed relevant links here for the references. Community-led Moose system. In Nepal, community-led Moose is common and managed by community-level water users committees. This system emphasizes communities need and use the water to fulfill their requirements. Rautinen et al. Has mentioned in a paper of water alternatives that Moose is all about acknowledging that this will happen anyhow. Similarly, Koppen et al. Has mentioned Moose respects people's priorities. In the same alignment, Nepal has learned from the practices of the community and has been promoting community-led Moose with the integration of an improved water management system. Moose is the main priority of this community. On the other hand, sectoral ministries have their own priority on water supply, irrigation and agriculture and less priority on Moose. As shown on the picture, it shows a need for a strong advocacy to institutionalize the Moose in Nepal. Moose by design options. Based on the current practices in Nepal, Moose design options can be categorized into 4 different options as in the picture in addition of the de facto Moose. SUSWA prepared a Moose design options and shared with the DWSSM, requesting to consider it in the design guideline for rural water supply schemes during the updating of the guidelines. SUSWA has also developed a Moose design package for qualitative design with the use of differential GPS, mobile application and design software. First design option, it is a single tank blue water Moose in which additional water for productive use will be tapped out and supplied through a single reservoir and domestic for both uses. Second option is with the separate 2 tanks. One is the domestic and another is for the productive uses. This option is very popular due to the separate tanks and networks for the domestic and productive uses. Third option is almost the same as that of the second option except multiple productive uses. It consists of many productive uses such as water mill for grain processing, power generation, irrigation, etc. It requires a strong sectoral coordination and more budget as well for its implementation. Fourth option is grey water and blue water Moose, network Moose, in which grey water network will be established to channelize the wastewater for the productive uses after the domestic uses like irrigation. Water management technologies integration. Field evidence has shown that the community-led Moose are using water management technologies, specifically water-saving water storage technologies like drip irrigation system, micro sprinkler irrigation, low-cost water storage reservoir. High-value crop, vegetable, and some livelihood options have shown good productive results, including increased consumption of vegetables at the household level. Technical know-how on agriculture inputs, technological options, and market linkage are other aspects for raising the income of Moose users, mainly for the marginalized smallholders. So, a comprehensive package of agriculture input, appropriate technology, and market linkage with the Moose system are the tool to transform the livelihood of rural people. Moose is an excellent model of sustainable water resource management which also includes water source protection, springside management, watershed management, water safety plan with climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. Moose scaling up and its institutionalized. There is a very high interest of rural communities in Moose due to its direct connection with their livelihoods. It should be well incorporated in the policies and plan of the government from the federal level to the local level. A Moose practitioner, Raj Jishi, has mentioned a Moose scale-up model in Nepal in his PhD dissertation, is on the as shown on the diagram, focusing on the local government. All these modalities need to be realized by the policymaker and requires advocacy at all levels. Among the three tiers of the government, local government is in the center and in direct connection with the communities. So, a local government needs to include Moose as a tool to break the vicious circle of poverty. Relevant ministries, department, units should understand Moose and its impact on people's livelihood to include in the policies and plan. Thank you for your kind attention and your great interest in Moose. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to.
Thank you, Narayan. Fantastic presentation. And so we had a really good idea from across the globe on how Moose is being implemented or struggling in some cases to be implemented, from those policy recommendations and implementation actions that are happening at local level, getting communities involved and making sure that any technology or any application that is designed with the local communities in mind. So we do have one question from the chat box, and so by all means add any other questions that you would like in there, and we can read them out. The first question is from Gratle from Botswana. We said he'd just like to know what ways we can use treated water in the agricultural sector. So maybe for this question, we can start with you, Narayan, just to see if you can help answer that question. In what ways we can use treated water in the agriculture sector?
Okay, thank you, David, and for the good questions from the participants. Yes. The treated water, it depends on the capacity and the knowledge of the designers. Like whenever we will bring the water, additional water from the source, then we can divert the additional sources before going to the domestic water, and that we can provision the one water structure so that it can divert the additional water on the separate irrigation tank, which is a very good way. And that would be the best options. And in case of the first system, the first type of multiple use system, yes, definitely there will be the treated water, because the only one tank will be there. And in such cases, the more the good aspect is that it will be the economical one from the construction period. But for longer term, it might be slightly more due to this treated water may go towards the productive uses as well. So the first option, that is there is the limitation. The advantage and disadvantage both, because the advantage is the economical design, which only the one network will supply the water for the both uses. But the demerits might be the treated water may also go for the productive uses. So that's the one for the type one the Moose system. But for the second options, where we will bring the water supply system, additional water supply system, it can be diverted before going to the the domestic water supply tank. So it can be diverted to the productive use, and depending on the demand of domestic use and productive use, the supply of water can be diverted accordingly. So these are, I think, it may give some sense, and we may discuss further if needed. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think that does give a good outline of exactly how that can be used. What about in Colombia, Isabel? Coming to you, the same question, but perhaps we can add to that the second part of that question, which is: are there also affordable technologies to be able to treat this grey water that can then be used in the agricultural sector? So, over to you, Isabel.
Thank you very much. We are a very regulated country, so we do everything which is regulated, and we have not progressed so much on regulation regarding wastewater reuse, treated wastewater reuse. So I don't think we have like institutionalized that, so that has made that we don't have like a lot of progress on that area. For now, we are allowed by a regulation to use treated wastewater for it's like crops that are not consumed, therefore it's like directly consumed raw vegetables or things like that. So I think that is possible, like a big scale for agroindustrial crops, but not for like gardens or a small or at the household level yet. So we are a little bit behind on that matter. That's what I can say for now.
And actually, potentially, Barbara, you could even weigh in on this discussion. And Isabel says that they're a little bit behind on that, but maybe you can you can add some to that.
Thank you. So, that's a long standing debate in the whole multiple use services, the quality of water. I would like to take it from the other side, and basically saying that even in Nepal, the mountainous streams and groundwater usually are still quite clean. And the real issue is the 3 liter per person per day that should be clean and treated. So we don't need to treat water for crops, but we don't need to treat water for scrubbing floors or laundry either. So then the crucial difference between water for drinking and water for other domestic uses comes up, and then also other domestic uses and productive water uses. So, for example, Colombia and elsewhere as well, there is then the whole issue of filtering, maybe chemical, but filtering of just 3 liters per person per day that should be clean for drinking, and using for all other uses, all the domestic uses and productive uses. You just you don't need to treat. And of course, the whole issue, we don't need to pollute either. That's another one. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. And maybe, changing scope a little bit, and we start to have a look a little bit about this idea of what this entire session has been about, this idea of people-centered data and inclusivity. And with that, we come to Francis's question. And maybe with that, Jean-Marie, you could help in answering this one. His question is, in the bid to optimize rural water use through enhanced people-centered data and inclusivity, I'm thinking that the use of communal water kiosks, as opposed to last-minute household connection, is retrogressive. What are the thoughts of the panel members? Thank you. Over to you, Jean-Marie.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Francis, for that quite elaborate observation. But I would want also to say to Francis that I don't think one size fits all. When we look at multiple use, at the end of the day, we want to maximize the water services. and depending on the context in which we are trying to improve the livelihood of the people, because at the end of the day it's about improving the livelihood of the people. In some cases, the communal setup that's the most appropriate. Like for instance, if we have a communal borehole without a yield that would allow us to provide piped water within the system, of course, would advocate for approach like your water kiosks. But the water kiosk also behind it's this cost effectiveness, because also at the end of the day, most of the infrastructure like your boreholes, they've been unsustained, or they were not sustainable due to lack of maintenance, and usually the cost of maintenance it's not catered for the moment the system is actually put in place. So the water kiosk has been kind of pushed to kind of make sure that there's some way of maintaining the system. So briefly, I would say yes. Let's not think that there is one silver bullet because we talk about MUS, but depending on the context where we are, sometimes the communal approach would be in place, and in other case, when you can pipe, then you would consider those connections. And also it's about affordability. It's more costly to try and pipe all villages. So maybe that's what I would want to say at this point, David. But thank you, Francis, for that great observation.
Great response, Jean-Marie. And I think that can also even allude to the idea of guidelines when we look at Moose. And with that, actually, James, you had a question directly to Isabel. So perhaps maybe I'll leave that open to you, James, that you can ask directly Isabel this question about guidelines and elaborate a little bit around that question.
Yeah, and I had both for Isabel and Narayan as well. I've seen Narayan has answered that, the water that goes into the treated one is more for productive uses, which makes sense. I think one of the specific question, for example, how do you incentivize that in practice? You making sure that when local government or the people constructing these systems, when they're designing those systems, actually follow that guideline, that they have two separate tanks. It's easy to have it in the policy directive, in the guidelines and practice manual, but then when you go to the ground, you still find it's one tank, not treated. They use it for everything, or it's one tank, treat everything, which is the one tank. They use it treated water to irrigate and stuff. But I think the question is how going beyond that, how governments, and this is not just for Isabel only, good to hear from Isabel, but also from anyone else, how that sort of specific incentive you put in place to ensure that they will have these two separate tanks, with clear separation to optimize cost as well, and also to protect people. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we have an incentive program. I think the only is the enabling environment. This is written in the regulation. So hopefully, more engineers will try to innovate in these aspects, but there's no programs or incentives as far as I know. And I think that will be something great to progress on making real these things which are already now like as principles in our regulation. So I think it's principles that allow people to think outside the box, the traditional way of providing water, but not really incentives in place to make it real yet. So I think there's a lot of work in that area to be able to materialize these better ideas for the rural people.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, James, for that question. And to be perfectly honest, I think we could continue this discussion well into the night and over a couple of drinks. But unfortunately, we only have an hour, and so we're having to close this session at the moment. For sure, you have more questions. For sure, you have other doubts and other things you would like to ask. No problem. You can get in touch with each one of the speakers, or indeed with us at Rural Water Supply Network, and we can get those questions and ideas off to each of those speakers that I'm sure would be more than happy to answer. We do have a small Mentimeter questionnaire for you. There's the QR code. While you are getting into that Mentimeter and are able to download the questionnaire, in the interest of time, I'm actually just going to pass directly over to Barbara. You can then close this the session for us. So in the background, you can answer the questions and on that Mentimeter. And as I mentioned, any other questions, any other doubts that you have, by all means, send that through to us, and we can relay that to the speakers. So from my side, thank you very much for joining us, and over to you, Barbara.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the speakers. Thanks for the questions. 70 participants. It is amazing to see how social innovation really has changed a lot in the past 20 years at all levels. We are working now with Colombia as the big champion, in my view, on national policy, the principles, as you say, but also what came out very clearly, the context in which you work, and listening to the communities, how they have managed what already and what their needs are for technical support, financial support, funding earmarks like in Kenya. No funding earmarks, there is money. Community, you can tell what you really see as your priority. And in that one, the priority, of course, for domestic users, for everybody, remains on the agenda. Let's be very clear on that. As long as that is not addressed, as the water sector has been doing excellent work, human rights, etc. It remains a priority. However, it's not the only one. There are livestock. There are also basic other needs for productive water users. Not everybody does it. Everybody does it a bit different. So we have to look at the local context. So I'm delighted to close and continue the social innovation around moose. Thank you very much, everybody, the speakers, the panels, etc., for your attention. And we hope to stay in touch as the Rural Water Supply Network on this theme. Thank you very much.
Bye.